My name is Nadia Whitlock, and I was 36 years old the night my husband slapped me in front of 520 people. It happened at Ravenmore Country Club, beneath crystal chandeliers and a ceiling painted to look like a summer sky. The kind of room where women wore diamonds before sunset and men laughed too loudly into glasses of bourbon. It was Margot Whitlock's Mother's Day gala, the crown jewel of her charity season. The night every donor, board member, judge's wife, and newspaper photographer in Pittsburgh came to remind her how generous she was. I was not seated with the family. I was at table 39, near the service hallway, half hidden behind a white column wrapped in roses I knew had been overbilled. My name tag said only Nadia, not Nadia Whitlock. Just Nadia, like a volunteer they had borrowed for the evening. At 9:10, Margot stepped onto the stage and began speaking about real mothers. At first, she sounded gracious. Then her voice shifted. She talked about tradition, gratitude, women who knew their place, daughters raised in rented apartments by foreign women who never understood American family values. She never said my mother's name. She did not have to. I stood before I knew my hands had left my lap. My voice was quiet, but the microphone caught enough of it. My mother worked days in courtrooms and nights at a kitchen table so I could stand here without owing women like you my silence. The room froze. Elliot came toward me fast, his face flushed, his tuxedo collar crooked. Apologized to my mother. I looked at the man I had once loved and said, "No." His hand crossed my face. The sound went through the speakers. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then I touched my lip, felt the sting, and pulled out the white linen handkerchief embroidered with my mother's name, Irina. And I thought, very clearly, none of you know who she is. Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet you're watching this video right now while lying down with your legs crossed, right? If that's true, type 3. If not, type 4. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. To understand why that thought steadied me more than the handkerchief did, you have to understand the woman who embroidered it. My mother, Irina Volskaya, came to Pittsburgh from St. Petersburg with 1 suitcase, 2 wool coats, and a degree nobody in Pennsylvania wanted to recognize. She was 27, newly divorced, and already already carrying me beneath a gray winter coat she had bought secondhand from a church basement. She used to say America did not open its arms to her. It opened a form, asked for identification, and told her to stand in the next line. So she stood. She stood in government offices with a dictionary in her purse. She stood at bus stops before sunrise. She stood behind deli counters, in laundromats, in apartment hallways that smelled like boiled cabbage and bleach. By the time I was 6, she had become a certified court interpreter. By the time I was 12, she was taking night classes. By the time I was 17, she had passed the bar exam and started working for a legal aid clinic that served women who arrived at her desk with bruised pride, empty wallets, and children sitting too quietly beside them. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a tailor shop in Greenfield. The radiators clanked all winter. The kitchen window looked out over a brick wall. My bed was a pull-out couch with 1 stubborn spring near the middle, but every book I ever needed appeared on that coffee table somehow. Used textbooks, library discards, SAT guides with other people's notes in the margins. My mother did not believe in pretending life was softer than it was. If I came home crying because a girl at school mocked my lunch, or a teacher shortened our last name because it was easier, she never rushed to make the pain disappear. She would put tea in front of me, sit across the table, and ask the same question. What happened exactly? Not how did I feel? Not who was mean. Exactly. Then, she would make me tell it in order. Time, place, words used. Who was there? What I did next. When I got older, I understood what she had been teaching me. Pain could swallow you if you left it unnamed, but written down, placed in sequence, attached to facts, it became something you could hold without drowning. Her rule was simple. Cry only long enough to understand what hurt you, she told me, then write down what happened. That was how she raised me. Not to be hard. To be clear, clarity was exactly what I lost when I first met Elliot Whitlock. He came into my life with the kind of attention that felt rare because it was quiet. He remembered small things. He noticed when I changed my coffee order. He asked about my work and listened long enough to ask a second question. When he laughed, he leaned back like the world had given him permission to relax for a moment. For 9 months, I thought I had found a man who was gentle because he chose to be, not because life had never tested him. Then he took me to meet his mother. The Whitlock house sat at the end of a private road in Suickley, all pale stone, black shutters, and trimmed hedges that looked too disciplined to be alive. Elliot squeezed my hand before we got out of the car. "She can be intense," he said, "but she means well." I should have paid more attention to the word intense. People use it when they are trying not to say controlling. Margot Whitlock opened the door herself. She was tall, silver-haired, elegant in a cream blouse with pearl buttons. She did not hug me. She looked at my shoes, my coat, my face, then finally my hand in Elliot's. "Nadia," she said, as if testing whether the name belonged in her mouth. Dinner was served in a room lined with portraits of Whitlock men. Founders, donors, board members, men in dark suits with courthouse steps behind them. Margot sat at the head of the table, Elliot on her right, me halfway down like a guest whose placement had been carefully measured. At first, the questions sounded harmless. Where did I grow up? What did my mother do? Was Volskaya my original last name? Did we rent or own? Had my mother practiced real law or mainly translation work? Each question wore perfume. Each one had teeth. I answered politely, because I still believed politeness could protect me. Margot listened with a small smile and turned the stem of her wineglass between 2 fingers. Then she pushed a leather album toward me. "These are the Whitlocks," she said. 5 generations of civic responsibility. When someone enters this family, she enters a history larger than herself. Elliot smiled, like this was charming. Margot slid a document across the table next. "Just a standard media consent for foundation events. Everyone signs it." I picked it up. One paragraph allowed the Whitlock Foundation to use my image, comments, and likeness in promotional material without further approval. I set the pen down. I'd like to read it first. For the first time that night, Margot stopped smiling. Elliot touched my knee under the table. "Mom just likes things handled properly." I looked at the paper, then at Margot's perfectly calm face, and understood something my mother would have seen immediately. In that house, control never raised its voice. It simply handed you a pen. I did not sign the consent form that night. Margot did not mention it again, which told me she had not forgotten. People like Margot never forget resistance. They just file it away until a better room is available. The wedding planning began 3 days after Elliot proposed. I had imagined something small. A garden ceremony, maybe 60 people, my mother in the front row, a dinner where no one needed a seating chart complicated enough to require software. Elliot said he wanted whatever made me happy. Then, Margot invited us to lunch at Ravenmore Country Club and arrived with a binder. Not ideas, decisions. The venue had been reserved, the florist had been contacted. The photographer was family approved. The guest list already had 180 names, most of whom I had never met. When I asked whether we could keep it smaller, Margot smiled at me over her salad. "A Whitlock wedding is not just a wedding, dear. It is a community event." That was the first time I noticed how often she used the word community when she meant audience. I gave in more than I should have. I told he never did. He only squeezed my hand under tables and whispered, "Just this once," until once became every decision. The only thing I truly asked for was a tray of my mother's galopsy at the reception. Cabbage rolls, beef and rice, simmered slowly in tomato sauce the way Irina made them on Sundays. It was not expensive. It was not difficult. It was one small dish from the life I had before the Whitlocks. Margot looked at the menu draft and circled the word in red pen. "This is a wedding," she said. not an ethnic food fair. Elliot laughed softly, like she had made an awkward joke. I looked at him, waiting for the correction that never came. So the Golubsi disappeared. On my wedding morning, my mother came into the bridal room, carrying a small white box. Inside was a linen handkerchief, folded square, with her name embroidered in dark blue Cyrillic thread along the corner. Irina, I wanted you to have something from home, she said. I held it carefully, suddenly embarrassed by how much I wanted to cry. She touched my cheek. Wipe your tears. Then remember who you are. I thought she meant happy tears. I thought the hardest part was behind me. I tucked the handkerchief into my clutch and walked down an aisle lined with flowers Margot had chosen, toward a man who smiled like he was choosing me. Only later would I understand that some men smile that way because choosing is easy when they know their mother can unchoose you. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple was the day I stopped mistaking silence for peace. Margot hosted it at the Sewickley house, of course. The dining room had been arranged like a magazine spread. Bronze candlesticks, linen napkins folded into fans, tiny place cards written in gold ink. Mine said Nadia Whitlock, but I remember staring at it and feeling no comfort. A name on a card did not mean a seat at the table was truly yours. I brought the Golubsi anyway. Not for Margot, not even for Elliot. I brought them because my mother had stood in her kitchen the night before, rolling each cabbage leaf with careful hands, pretending not to care whether they would be welcomed. She packed them in a glass dish and wrapped the lid with 2 rubber bands so nothing would spill on the drive. For your table, she said. I did not correct her. When I set the dish near the turkey, Brielle looked at it like I had placed a muddy boot beside the silverware. She was Elliot's younger sister, 34, blonde, sharp-chinned, and permanently amused by things she had not earned. What is that? She asked. Golubsi, I said. My mother made them. Margot lifted the foil. Steam rose, warm and familiar. For half a second, I smelled my childhood kitchen instead of her dining room. Then she smiled. She still thinks bringing cabbage makes her family. The table went quiet, in that careful way rich people go quiet when cruelty is too well dressed to interrupt. Brielle laughed first. A small, bright sound. Tessa, Elliot's cousin, looked down at her napkin. Elliot reached for his water glass and said nothing. That was the part that stayed with me. Not Margot's words, not Brielle's laugh, Elliot's silence. I carried the dish back to my car before dinner was served. I sat behind the wheel for 12 minutes with the engine off, the Golubsi cooling on the passenger seat. My phone was in my hand. I wanted to call my mother. I wanted to lie and say everyone loved them. Instead, I opened the Notes app and wrote the sentence exactly as Margot had said it. Months later, I found the group chat. Elliot had left his phone on the bathroom counter while the shower ran. The screen lit up with a message from Brielle in a chat called True Whitlocks. I should have looked away. I didn't. There were photos of me from family dinners, charity brunches, holidays, captions under them. The charity wife, mail order sophistication, Russian leftovers in a designer dress. Then I found the picture of me holding my mother's dish at Thanksgiving. Brielle had written, "When someone brings village food to a legacy table." Under it, Elliot had sent a laughing emoji. I took 63 screenshots before the shower turned off. Then I put the phone back exactly where he had left it. That night, I created a folder on my laptop. I named it Record. After that, the house became the next battlefield. Elliot brought it up on a Sunday morning while I was sorting laundry. He had a real estate listing open on his tablet, and the hopeful expression of a boy asking permission for something he already knew he would get. 5 bedrooms in Sewickley, brick colonial, 2-car garage, finished basement, a kitchen with marble counters so white they looked afraid of fingerprints. The listing price was $537,000. It's perfect, he said. Close to work, close to mom, good neighborhood. I noticed the order before I noticed the price. Close to work, close to mom, then neighborhood. I sat beside him and looked through the photos. It was beautiful in the impersonal way. Expensive houses can be beautiful before anyone has lived honestly inside them. We could buy something smaller, I said. Something in both our names. We have savings. We don't need your mother involved. Elliot's face tightened, not with anger yet, but with discomfort. The kind he always showed when I suggested adulthood, without Margot's approval. She'll think I'm rejecting the family. You're buying a house with your wife, I said. That isn't rejection. He stared at the screen. You don't understand how this works. He was right. I didn't. In my mother's world, help came with tired hands and soup left on the stove. In the Whitlock world, help came with signatures, conditions, and a copy of the key. By Monday afternoon, Margot had called a realtor. By Wednesday, she had toured the house without me. By Friday, she had spoken with the lender. She used phrases like protecting the asset and structuring things wisely, as if our marriage were a company she had acquired. At the closing, I watched her sign beside Elliot with a pearl pen she had brought from home. Her name slid onto the paperwork so smoothly it felt rehearsed. There, she said, smiling at me. Now you two have stability. But stability should not feel like someone else's hand on the back of your neck. We moved in 2 months later. Margot arrived before the movers, carrying a folder of paint samples and a list of approved contractors. She chose the dining room color. She recommended the alarm company. She told Elliot the guest room should remain neutral in case family needed it. Family meant her. That night, after Elliot fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen island under lights too bright for a room that still smelled like cardboard. I opened a separate savings account with a bank Margot had never used. I increased my retirement contribution. I updated my resume, not because I planned to leave that week, but because a locked door is only useful if you know where the exits are. Then I opened the folder called Record and added a new document. House timeline. Date. Amount. Names on paperwork. Witnesses present. My mother had taught me to write down what happened. So I did. The gala season began in February, when Margot started sending emails with subject lines in all caps. Donor confirmations. Seating priorities. Board visibility. Press language. By then, I had been married to Elliot for almost 4 years, long enough to know that Margot's charity work was not charity in the way my mother understood the word. Irina had sat with women in courthouse hallways and explained restraining orders in Russian, Polish, and broken English. Margot rented ballrooms, hired photographers, and made suffering look elegant enough for a program booklet. The Whitlock Children's Relief Fund was her masterpiece. Every Mother's Day, she hosted a gala for pediatric medical grants. This year, Ravenmore Country Club expected 520 guests at $275 a plate. Margot wanted white roses, silver linens, a string quartet during cocktail hour, and a donor board in the lobby that would glow all night with the total raised. Betrayal was the event director. I was assigned to support. That meant printing name tags, checking RSVPs, confirming meal choices, and smiling at people who assumed I was paid staff. Margot told me I had such a calm presence at the front door. I understood the compliment. She wanted me visible enough to be useful, but not close enough to belong. Still, every task gave me access. One Thursday afternoon, Betrayal forwarded me the donor database login so I could help prepare thank you cards. The message was careless, almost bored. Nadia, please cross-check pledges against addresses. Don't overthink it. I opened the database that night, after Elliot went to bed. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional click of the heating vents. I made tea, sat at the kitchen island, and started with the current year donations. Confirmed donations, $412,000. I checked again. Then I opened the draft layout for the lobby donor board. Displayed total, $331,000. The difference sat there in the blue light of my laptop screen. 8,100美元. I did not move for a full minute. Numbers do not accuse anyone by themselves. They only ask questions. My job had taught me that panic makes people sloppy, and sloppiness ruins evidence. So, I saved copies, noted the time, and kept reading. The vendor file was worse. A decor company with no active business registration. An audio contractor listed at the address of a closed laundromat. Repeated invoices under the internal review threshold, small enough to pass as routine, consistent enough to form a pattern. The next morning, my phone rang at 8:17. "This is Marina Koval," the woman said. "I own Koval Floral Studio. Someone sent me a confirmation with a number I never charged. Her real invoice was $9,800. The foundation file showed $28,600. I looked at both numbers on my screen and felt something inside me go completely still. Margot had built a ballroom full of witnesses. She had no idea she had also handed me the ledger. I did not call Elliot. That was the first decision that mattered. A younger version of me would have walked upstairs, held out the laptop, and asked him to explain what his family had done. I would have mistaken confrontation for strength. I would have believed that, if I showed him the numbers, the invoices, the false vendor records, he would finally see what I had been trying to tell him for years. But I already knew how Elliot handled truth when it made Margot look bad. He softened it. He delayed it. He renamed it. Then he handed it back to me, as if I had created the problem by noticing it. So I packed my laptop, the printed invoices, Marina Koval's corrected estimate, and a flash drive into my work bag. On Saturday morning, I drove east before sunrise to my mother's apartment. Pittsburgh was still gray and half asleep, the bridges crossing the rivers like dark ribs against the sky. Irina opened the door before I knocked twice. She had tea ready. She always did when she knew something was wrong. Not because I told her, because mothers like mine hear silence the way other people hear alarms. I sat at her kitchen table, the same square table where I had studied for exams, filled out college forms, and once cried over a man who forgot my birthday. The lace curtain moved slightly in the heat from the radiator. On the stove, a pot of borscht simmered low, red and steady. I told her everything. Not dramatically. Not all at once. I told it the way she had taught me, in order. The dinner questions. The wedding menu. The Thanksgiving insult. The group chat. The house paperwork. The gala assignments. The donor total. The board total. Marina's call. The vendors that did not exist. Irina listened without touching her tea. Her face did not change, but I saw her hand move once, slowly, until it rested flat against the table. When I finished, she asked, "Do you have documentation?" I nodded and slid the folder toward her. She did not open it immediately. Instead, she looked at me with the calm expression she used when a room was about to become more serious than anyone expected. "What do you want, Nadia?" The answer surprised me by how quickly it came. "I want to leave," I said, "but I do not want them to turn me into the story they tell afterward." Irina opened the folder then. She read the first page, then the second. Her eyes moved carefully, line by line. Finally, she said, "Then do not give them a private argument. Private arguments become rumors." She tapped the donor report once with her finger. "Let them speak in the room they built. Let them stand under their own lights. Let the people they invited hear them clearly." I swallowed. "You think I should wait until the gala?" "I think Margot Whitlock has spent years trusting audiences more than truth," my mother said. "That is a dangerous habit." Then she reached across the table and closed her hand over mine. "You are not going there to fight," she said. "You are going there prepared." Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet your phone battery is at 65% right now, right? If that's true, type 1. If not, type 2. Let's see whether I got it right. All right. Enough talking. Let's begin the story. Prepared did not mean brave. Not at first. It meant I went home that evening and acted normal, while Elliot watched a hockey game in the den. It meant I washed 2 mugs, answered an email from Betrayal about napkin colors, and kissed my husband goodnight without asking him which version of himself would show up at the gala. After he fell asleep, I took my laptop to the guest room and closed the door. The folder named Record had become larger than I ever intended. At the beginning, it held one sentence from Thanksgiving. Now it held 4 years of my marriage arranged in files and dates. I started building a timeline because emotion could be dismissed, but sequence was harder to deny. First dinner at Margot's house. Unsigned media consent. Wedding menu changes. Thanksgiving insult. Screenshots from True Whitlocks. Mortgage documents from Suickley. Emails assigning me volunteer duties. Brielle's database login. Donation total $412,000. Donor board total $331,000. Marina Koval's corrected invoice. Vendor addresses. Inactive registration. Repeated payments below review threshold. I did not write adjectives. I did not call anyone cruel or corrupt or abusive. I wrote what happened. I let the facts stand close enough together to introduce themselves. At 1:06 a.m., I uploaded one copy to encrypted cloud storage. At 1:22, I saved another to a flash drive and sealed it in an envelope addressed to my mother. At 1:37, I printed the summary report and tucked it into the lining pocket of my navy coat. Then I went looking for my phone charger. That was how I found the letter. Elliot kept an old oak desk in the home office, one of the few things in our house Margot had not chosen. The bottom drawer was jammed halfway open. When I crouched to pull the charger from the outlet, I saw a yellowed envelope beneath a stack of tax documents. For Elliot, when you marry. The handwriting was careful and slanted. Conrad Whitlock's handwriting. Elliot's father had been dead for 21 years, but the ink still looked like it had something urgent to say. I should have left it alone. I did not. Inside were 2 pages. Conrad wrote about marriage, about courage, about the danger of confusing loyalty with obedience. Near the bottom, one line stopped me cold. If your wife ever tells you she is hurting, believe her before the world teaches you how late you are. I sat on the office floor for a long time. Then I photographed both pages, returned the letter exactly where I found it, and turned off the lamp. By morning, everything was in place, except the part of me that still wished Elliot would choose differently. The day of the gala arrived polished and bright, the way expensive disasters often do. By noon, Ravenmore Country Club looked less like a building and more like Margot's reflection of herself. White roses climbed the columns in the lobby. Silver linens covered the registration tables. A string quartet tuned near the staircase, while staff in black jackets moved through the halls carrying trays, wires, programs, champagne flutes, all the small machinery required to make wealth appear effortless. I arrived at 4:30 in a navy dress and flats, because Brielle had emailed me twice to remind me I would be standing most of the evening. She met me at the entrance with a clipboard pressed against her chest and a headset tucked behind one ear. Her smile was quick and thin. "You're on check-in until dinner service," she said. "After that, table 39. She handed me a name tag. It said Nadia. No last name. I looked at it for 1 second too long. Brielle noticed. "The formal ones got printed early," she said. "Don't make it weird." I clipped it to my dress. Behind her, the donor board glowed against the far wall, blue numbers floating above the foundation logo. Whitlock Children's Relief Fund. Tonight's total, $331,000. I took out my phone as if checking a message and photographed it. The timestamp read 8:07 p.m. Saturday, the 11th of May 2024. I sent it to my mother without a caption. She replied 3 minutes later. Received. That was all. Guests began arriving before 6. I greeted them one by one. Hospital trustees, council members, contractors who owed Elliot favors, women in silk shawls who kissed Margot on both cheeks, men who said her name like it opened doors. Marina Koval came through in a black dress, her hands still faintly stained green from flower stems. She squeezed my fingers once and said nothing. Lydia Markham arrived alone, 72 years old, silver hair pinned neatly, a retired teacher's posture still straight inside her blue evening coat. She looked at my name tag, then at my face. "Are you family, dear?" she asked. I smiled, because there were too many true answers. I'm Elliot's wife. Her eyes softened in a way that made me look away first. Inside the ballroom, Margot stood near the stage in a silver gown, accepting compliments like tribute. Elliot sat at table, one with a glass already in front of him. He saw me across the room, lifted 2 fingers in a gesture too small to be a wave, then turned back to his mother. At 7:30, I found table 39. Behind a column. Near the service hallway. From there, the stage looked far away, but the speakers were directly above me. Margot had made sure I would hear every word. At 9:10, Margot walked onto the stage. The room quieted before she reached the podium. That was one of her gifts. She did not ask for attention. She trained rooms to hand it to her. The spotlight caught the silver in her dress and the pearls at her throat. She smiled out at 520 people, as if every chair, every glass, every check written that evening belonged to her personally. "Good evening," she began, "and happy Mother's Day." Applause rose, warm and polished. She spoke first about children, about hospitals, about the kindness of donors and the importance of tradition. I sat at table 39 with my hands folded in my lap, feeling the small weight of the flash drive inside my coat lining. Then her voice changed. "Tonight is also about the women who teach us what family means," she said. "Real mothers do more than give birth. They teach belonging. They teach gratitude. They teach their daughters not to mistake ambition for character." A few people shifted in their seats. I looked toward table 1. Elliot was watching his mother with the soft, open expression he never gave me anymore. Margot continued. "Not every woman who raises a child understands American family. Some bring resentment from rented rooms in courthouse hallways and call it strength." The air left my lungs slowly. She had not said Irina's name. She did not need to. Every word had been sharpened for my mother. A woman at my table lowered her fork. Lydia Markham turned her head toward me, her face changing with recognition. Margot smiled sadly, the way people smile when they want cruelty mistaken for wisdom. "We must pray for sons who remember where they come from," she said, looking directly at Elliot, "and for wives who learn to honor the families they marry into." That was when I stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. My chair moved back with a soft scrape against the floor. Heads turned, row by row, until the whole room seemed to breathe in my direction. I did not climb the stage. I stood where I was, under the speaker, behind the column where Margot had placed me. My mother spent her life helping women who had no one powerful standing beside them, I said. She did not need a ballroom to prove she was a mother. She proved it every day by showing up. The room went still. Margot's face folded into hurt so quickly it looked rehearsed. "Do you see?" she said into the microphone. "This is what I have endured. At my own event, on Mother's Day." Elliot stood. He crossed the room with his jaw tight and his glassy eyes fixed on me. "Apologize," he said. "No." His hand struck my face. The sound cracked through the speakers above me. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Lydia stood. Marina covered her mouth. Somewhere near the front, a phone rose into the air, then another. I touched my lip, tasted salt and metal, and pulled out my mother's handkerchief. "Irina." I pressed it to my mouth, folded it once, and looked at Elliot. He looked frightened now. Not sorry. Frightened. I turned and walked out while Margot's voice followed me through the microphone. "Let her go," she said. She always wanted a scene. Outside, the night air felt cold against my cheek. I unlocked my car, sat behind the wheel, and called the only person I needed. My mother answered on the second ring. "Mom," I said, my voice steady until the last word. "Please come." Irina arrived 38 minutes later. She did not run across the parking lot. She did not shout my name or throw her arms around me the way people do in movies. She walked to my car with a black coat over her shoulders, her gray hair pulled back, her face calm in the way courtrooms become calm before a verdict. When I opened the door, she looked at me once. Only once. Then she took out her phone and photographed my cheek, my lip, the handkerchief in my hand, the time on the dashboard. the entrance of Ravenmoor behind me. "Do not wipe anything else," she said. "Do not change your clothes. Do not explain yourself twice." I nodded. Then she held out her hand. We walked back inside together. The ballroom had not recovered. Music played too softly. People stood in clusters, pretending to talk while watching the doors. Margot saw us first. Her expression sharpened when she recognized my mother. "If you came here to create more embarrassment," Margot said, "you are too late." Irina stopped in the middle of the lobby, beside the donor board still glowing $331,000 in blue light. "My name is Irina Volskaya," she said. "Your son struck my daughter in front of witnesses. Battery is not a family matter." The sentence changed the air. Elliot stood near table 1, pale now, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Brielle rushed forward with her clipboard like paper could protect them. "It was barely anything," she said. "Everyone saw Nadia provoke him." Irina looked at her. "Good. Then everyone can give statements." Brielle Wonquier. That was when I opened my coat and removed the printed report. I did not throw it. I did not wave it. I placed it on the registration table, under the same lights where guests had signed their names and written checks. "Confirmed donations this year were $412,000, I said. "The public board shows $331,000. There are also vendor payments totaling $76,400 over 4 years to companies that do not appear to operate." Margot's face changed before she spoke. That was how I knew the numbers were right. "You had no right to access foundation records." Brielle gave me the login. 520 people did not gasp at once. It happened in pieces, a whisper near the bar, a chair leg scraping the floor. Marina Koval stepping forward to say her invoice had been altered. Lydia Markham telling a man in a dark suit, "I saw the strike. I will say so." Detective Aaron Bell arrived 12 minutes later. Elliot admitted what he had done because too many phones had captured the sound. Margot tried to speak for him until the detective told her to step back. For the first time since I had known her, no one moved when she expected them to. The rest did not happen in one dramatic collapse. It happened through forms, statements, hearings, audits, attorneys, and doors closing quietly. Elliot was charged. Margot was removed from the foundation. Brielle lost her position. The gala was suspended. The Whitlock name stayed on buildings, but it no longer owned every room. I filed for divorce and asked for none of their trust money. I kept my savings, my work, my name, and the right to sleep, without waiting for footsteps in the hallway. Months later, I sat in my mother's kitchen, eating golopsy from a chipped white plate. No seating chart. No name tag. No one deciding whether I belonged. Irina poured tea and asked, "Can you breathe?" I looked at the steam rising between us. "Yes," I said, finally. What Nadia learned that night was not only about marriage, money, or one powerful family losing control. It was about the quiet danger of staying too long in places where your pain is constantly renamed as sensitivity, your dignity is treated as pride, and your silence is mistaken for permission. Sometimes the people who hurt us do not begin with cruelty. They begin with small corrections. A joke about your background, a seat placed far from the family table, a tradition dismissed as embarrassing, a name left off a tag, a partner who says, "Don't make this a problem," until one day you realize the problem has been living beside you the whole time. Family is not proven by blood, money, legacy, or last names carved into buildings. Family is proven by who shows up when your voice shakes, who tells the truth when lying would be easier, who protects your dignity when the room is full of people waiting for you to shrink. Love should never require you to disappear piece by piece, and endurance is not always strength. Sometimes strength is collecting yourself quietly, making a plan, calling the one person who truly sees you, and walking out before the damage becomes your identity. Nadia did not win because she destroyed them. She won because she finally stopped asking cruel people to decide whether she belonged. And if you want more stories about truth, resilience, and women finding their voice, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to remember their worth.